is an organizer of NYC HTML5 and the CTO of In Rhythm. And he will be giving us a talk about ES2015. And thank you to Huge for the space, the pizza, and Tom's time and guidance.
Thanks everyone for coming. We're a digital agency here in DC, slowly building an engineering team. So if you're ever interested in a job in the future, we don't have any openings at the moment, but I would probably pull from this community and the React DC meetup as soon as I'm looking to hire somebody.
There's also a huge office in New York, which I do not know if I should plug, but it is really cool too.
That's in a much larger engineering team. We're always looking out as well.
I was talking about the office. The office is also really cool.
The people are okay.
The people are actually better than the office, but the office is really cool. So it's funny how there's not that many people here. There's a gigantic gap in between me and you. So I'm going to probably be walking around as you see code things as well. Eventually I will send around these things there or will be runnable. So how many of you use React on a daily basis? Great. How many of you use ES6 with React? Okay, cool. So most of you, many of you. So for the people who kept their hands up during some but not the other, this is now the time. What are you waiting for? There are so many new features that ES2015 brings. It's going to be, by the way, it's hard. How many of you still say ES6? Okay, good. I don't know why it's ever going to go away. ES2016 I've actually gotten used to saying, but ES6 I feel like I said for, actually I'll get to that, for many years. So I'm glad we're eventually going to get started with the correct and better naming system. So I'm John. You can find me on the interwebs here. I love JavaScript. I have dalliances with HTML, with like Scala and Clojure and other things every once in a while. But I always come back to my language. So by the way, there are not that many people here, and I'm a very interactive person. So if you have any questions or thoughts or complaints or anything, feel free to just talk about it. So why am I looking at floppy disks? So ECMA ECMA script, ES2015, the actual ECMA thing, for me, confused the hell out of me forever. Because I know this thing called JavaScript, I know that there was this thing called JScript at some point, and there are all these other weird, somewhat implementations, but what is ECMAScript? So ECMAScript is actually the official scripting language of an international standards body called ECMA International. ECMA International is like IETF or IEEE. You ever heard of those things? So they standardize popular things. So they actually wrote and specified the first specification for what these are floppy disks. They didn't call this the cloud. Sometimes they call it USB drives, but they used to be these things called floppy disks that people passed around between them that had games like Wheel of Fortune or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on them. ECMA standardizes that. They also standardize C#, which, so in some senses, JavaScript is actually the scripting language for C# and not Java, which I find both funny and interesting. And I'm a C# person. It's very similar to Java. So ECMAScript, it has been a long trip and journey to get to where we are now. ECMAScript 3 was made in 1999. That added things like try and catch, regular expressions. Some pretty crazy things to the previous version of ECMAScript. ECMAScript 5 happened 10 years later and ended up adding a lot of the things that you're probably now comfortable with using, like array.prototype.filter, reduce, map, a lot of the really nice functional programming pieces, object.defined property, enumerable, writable, configurable, those kinds of things. That was all added in ECMAScript 5 in 2009. Sadly, because of the browser wars, a lot of those features have not been able to be used for a very long time. Gratefully, now we can use all of them, plus even more. So ECMAScript 6, does everyone know why the whole name change thing happened?
No.
Okay. So the ECMAScript numbering system has been changed as of June of last year. It used to be roughly numbers starting from oddly 3, skipping oddly the number 4, jumping to the number 5, which is because there was actually a version 4 that ended up being taken to the ActionScript. So if you are a Flash developer, if you have been working with Flash before, you actually did use what would have become ECMAScript 4. But because of many disagreements amongst both browser vendors and spec authors, ECMAScript 4 never actually came together. ECMAScript 5 was the next one. They skipped over 4 because 4 never happened. Between 3 and everything else, because it was 10 years, the list of potential features that they could add to the language grew immensely. Because in 10 years, good developers, good engineers can think of hundreds of really, really good ideas for what could be in the language. Eventually, they just cut it off and said, we can't keep having ideas, we need to actually ship something. Which I'm sure that if you're working on a product team, you have actually heard from either a dev manager or product manager or something. But in order to encourage that just ship it kind of philosophy, to make sure that ECMAScript or JavaScript, which is now, compared to 1999 or even 2009, JavaScript is a gigantic force within the software community, web or not. So in order to make sure that that sort of stagnation never happened again, the group of people that standardized JavaScript decided to switch the numbering scheme from incrementing integers to one that is year-based. This now forces them to every single year update the language. They have a release train philosophy. So every year a new spec will go out regardless of what actually gets finished. So the idea being that, similar to Agile Waterfall, all of those other things, incremental releases are better than no release at all. And incremental releases are much better than no release for 10 or 16 years. So ECMAScript 2016 actually just finished. They just agreed to all of the features of it. It is an extremely short list of features. There are only 2 features in ECMAScript 2016. Which, I mean, it's funny and it's kind of weird, but it's really good. Because this means that, okay, 1 year we actually got something. You add that over the course of multiple years, many things are in almost standardized stage. Next year we'll get some more. And next year we'll get some more. We won't have to wait until 2029 or whatever the next one will be, 2019. So the new features, just in case you want to know, in ECMAScript 2016, that I actually do not talk about in here, is the exponentiation operator. So in ECMAScript 2016, you can use two asterisks to say to the power of something. So 2 asterisk 3 will be 8. Whoa. Oh, fun. We had math.pal, but now we have an infix operator. It's amazing. So, and the other one is array.prototype.includes, which is a way to do the index of does not equal -1 thing, to actually say that a specific array contains a specific value. These are the only 2 differences between ECMAScript 2015 and ECMAScript 2016. So getting back to what I'm actually supposed to be talking about, ECMAScript 2015. So something that I really like about, so I asked a little earlier what other programming languages are. I had some people raise their hands. Some people are experienced with outside of JavaScript, some people aren't. What I really like about the software industry as a whole, is a big reason of why I am here, is that ideas are liberally stolen and no one calls it plagiarism. Right? Like, we don't have to consider, oh no, I took that architectural pattern from the O'Reilly book with the platypus on it. No, it's fine. We were just talking about software patents. Now it's a whole new lens to conduct. So I really like the fact that I'm not only allowed to, but I am encouraged to stand on the shoulders of giants. Other people have great ideas. Other people have great code. And typically I can take both easily. The authors of JavaScript. People who are on the technical committee that actually decide what features are on it share the same philosophy. So a lot of the features that came into ECMAScript 2015 were basically directly taken from other languages. Some of them will go through, some of them we won't. But I find this fascinating. So CoffeeScript, anyone a CoffeeScript person? I'll admit I didn't. I did. I stopped, but I did. Okay, that's fine. So CoffeeScript had arrow functions. We now have arrow functions. Generators came from Python. They have them in other languages as well. All of the new destructuring syntaxes that ECMAScript 2015 has all came from Lisp. Constant block scope, like how let does, allows you to have variables that are scoped to just 2 curly braces. That comes from C or C-based languages, wherever that originally came from. And then what I found most interesting in doing this little bit of research is that there's a programming language like A, and then there is actually a B, and there's C, obviously, and there's actually a programming language called E, which you can currently download and compile for your Mac. That is the only example of template strings that I could find that were exactly the same as JavaScript. Other programming languages like Ruby have string interpolation, but E has almost exactly the same implementation as JavaScript does. Is there a question? If you have them, please just let me know. This is it. So I'd like to go through here some reactive features. So there are the list of features for ES 2015. I'll get into this later. Is very large. I actually have done a like 2+ hour workshop on all of them. The particular ones that are most saliently useful for a React developer are roughly in order of priority: classes, arrow functions, computed property names, and spread and rest. And I'll get to them in that order in a second. What's up?
So before you go into the whole how ES 2015 and React chart go hand in hand, what is your opinion in terms of the React community completely going over to
ES6 classes?
Yeah.
So I was actually just going to talk about that. Oh. So, I mean, I have this very love-hate. Okay, so just in case people don't know, the React team and group have made a decision to wholeheartedly buy into ES6 classes as the extension mechanism for React components. You used to be able to use, and you still can, it's been deprecated but not removed.
Oh, has it?
Yeah.
Vixens? That's good.
Vixens are completely deprecated, yes. Vixens have been deprecated from before. Oh. So you can use React.create create class. That is no longer going to be supported. Yeah.
Really?
So I mean, it's not like in the next 6 months or there's no deadline.
Yeah.
They have decided to switch from using the React factory methods, if that's what you can call them, to extending the classes. So that is where a lot of this stuff comes from. You now have, in the future, partially when they've decided to remove the deprecated pieces, but also as they continue to add new features like completely stateless functional components and all the other, the React team, by the way, has like a million more ideas for completely awesome stuff that they just have notes on in their repo that they haven't even built yet. Mostly in Flow. It takes a little bit of time to actually parse, unless you're actually using Flow. Does anyone use Flow? I just like to do these. Okay. I feel like I've not yet met anyone. I've seen a lot of people that use TypeScript, but I have not seen anyone that uses Flow. Yeah. Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, TypeScript. I use TypeScript as well, but just to Angular 2 stuff, but not anything more than that. So the classes are the intention is that over the course of time, apps will be migrated from using React.create class to extending component. So,
I'll stop. Keep going.
Okay. We'll get to the off-topic ones later.
Yeah.
We have time. So most saliently, the biggest change with ECMAScript 2015's addition to your code base is ES6 classes. So what are ES6 classes? So for people from any other programming language, ES6 classes are very similar looking. They look almost exactly the same as classes in other languages. There are a few syntactical differences, but there are actually a lot more complicated semantic differences because all of ES6 classes are built on top of the original same prototypal inheritance scheme that JavaScript had before ES2015. All of this is basically fancy syntactic sugar. There's nothing particularly special with respect to classes that you could not do before ES2015 happened. All this does is change everything into constructor functions and methods on the prototype. So here I have a class called greeter. I have a constructor, which is something that before was a separate function that you would define. This sits inside of the class. Whatever you pass into it gets, whatever you pass into the call with the new gets passed into constructor. You can do whatever you want inside of that, and then you can call methods on it. This is sort of the most easy example. You can run them, these are very small, but it did work. So now, getting a little bit more complicated, what React will expect you to do, and I'll show you an example of that in a second, is be able to extend classes. Ideally, both my recommendation and Dan Abramov's recommendation is to only go one level deep. So not to have very complicated object inheritance hierarchies strategies. That's something that's true sort of in any programming language. JavaScript just recently got them, so we have to reiterate the fact that you shouldn't go very deep. Here I have a pirate. There is same constructor pattern. We also now in ECMAScript 2015 have super. Super does what you would expect if you come from a non-Java or from a more classically object-oriented programming language. It calls the same constructor as it was extended from. This is equivalent to greeter.call if you're using ECMAScript 5 inheritance schemes. And then here you get So before I get into the React portion of this, what questions do you have about classes?
So in some classes you create, they still have access to the attributes of the super class without calling super, right? Because it's implemented as prototypes.
So if you want, you mean if you want to call this dot? If you want a method, you have to call super. If you want a property, you can, sorry, if you want to override a method, so let's say I want to do.
No, I mean just the default behavior. Like if pirate extends greeter has ABC, pirate manually specify what C is by default against the value of A and B without calling super.
So if you extend, if you override a method, you are required to call super.
No, I mean that's like the attribute. There's
So you mean this?
No, there is ABC. And then like if there's an attribute called A, another one called B, and another called C.
Oh yes, yeah. So you would that would all carry down.
Okay, so it's just like prototype.
It's exactly like this.
Okay.
You just typed that when you said it.
Yeah, it wasn't already there.
Yeah.
That would be remarkable. I wish I could do that well. This is why if I could be standing over there. Yeah.
Does the one level deep recommendation include reaction?
Yes. So that's actually there's a great blog post by Dan Abramoff about this, but the recommendation is to, instead of creating a component that is a subcomponent of a component that you've defined, create a component that wraps that component. And add as a decorating component, or a higher, either that or a higher order component that would take whatever either logic or whatever view enhancing things like add a border or make accordion or something. Put that outside instead of inside the inheritance. The main reason for that is that it's quite, even to the most object-oriented, okay, first of all, JavaScript developers are not typically, myself included, very, it's not easy for me to grok complicated inheritance hierarchies. It's not been what I've dealt with for a very long time. I did Java a while ago, and I kind of think about it, but I don't have it. It's not muscle memory anymore, nor I believe is it for most JavaScript developers. But also, it's really opaque to figure that out in JavaScript, because you don't know where you have to walk your way through tons of code in probably different files and modules instead of just saying, okay, here's 1 and here's 2, and I'm done. So the expectation around building components in the future, as I said earlier, is building components that look like this. A few major differences here is that when we extend React component, there's no more getInitialState. The idea of getInitialState is moved into the constructor. So you can actually just set the state in the beginning to whatever you want. One of the core architectural or design influences that the React team want to get across is, as much as possible, we're not going to give you an API. We're just going to tell you to just use JavaScript. It's the old like Angular, in my head like Angular is still bleeding edge new. So it is, if you remember when Angular first like started to become big, one of their big statements was, don't worry, it's just JavaScript. You're just using POJOs. You don't have to use Ember as get and set, Ember objects and stuff like that. You can just use JavaScript. React is going a similar way in that they want you to think, oh, we won't give you an API for that because just use JavaScript, it's fine. Similarly that's why they're telling you to use classes now. Don't worry about it, just use classes, extend from this, just use JavaScript. There are a few other differences with respect to life cycles, and we'll get into some of them. So before I get there, in order to make the next example make sense, I'm going to talk about arrow functions. So arrow functions are now fairly ubiquitous, but very new and novel idea within ECMAScript 2015. So ECMAScript 2015 adds this new weird syntax here. So how many of you have used arrow functions? Okay, wow. This is like this is basically everything. It's amazing how much some pieces of ES 2015 have gone everywhere, like arrow functions, and other things that like no one has used at all. Like generators. Now people are trying to use them, they're getting more popular. Proxies, weak maps, those kinds of things. So arrow functions, they look like this. What used to make, when you used to have to type FUNCTION, for the people who don't like to type all of those characters, you can shorten it in this way. What the parameter list is inside the parentheses, then there is the so-called fat arrow, the equal sign greater than, and then a single statement. That statement gets returned back out. So here you see the number 20. You can optionally have curly braces for multiple lines, and then you have that return. So with respect to React,
Oh, sorry. With the arrow functions, it has to be a single, like expression, like in or can you do multiple lines? Like
you can do multiple lines if you have the. You can do. I'll show you in a second. You can do multiple lines as long as you also use the curly. So once you do multiple lines, you lose the automatic return. So this same result. So if you put curly braces around, you can have as many classes. If you don't have curly, did someone avoid the CoffeeScript or Python problem with white space delimited stuff? Yeah.
And then if you want to return an object, you have to wrap the curly braces in parentheses, right? Like if you wanted to not return, but just have the statement. So just get rid of the var y equals and just do like key equals x times 2. It can be key colon and x times 2.
So you're implicitly returning an object, you're saying? Or
Yeah.
auto
You want to
return? The syntax changes because.
Yeah, so you have to wrap that in parentheses. So instead of like two curly braces outside of it there, yeah.
Oh, yes. So, okay, I see what you mean.
Sorry, I was,
So in
yeah,
case
yeah.
you want to, so in case you want to actually return an object here, you have to wrap this in parentheses.
Yeah.
I see. Otherwise,
Yeah, because otherwise it makes, I was like, why is this not? I was like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So the reason for that, I mean, hopefully that makes sense. The reason for that is because it is, without the parentheses, it's an ambiguous thing. So let's see what this is. This looks like it could be the body of your multi-statement arrow function. But it's not, because key colon is not valid JavaScript. So this is some syntax error, I just don't know what it is. Or
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
No,
because
right.
no, I know what it is. It's because that's a label.
I was gonna say, yeah.
There's this really weird feature in JavaScript called labels. Have any of you used this?
No, of course.
No, you know, I would love to hear a use case. I mean, I know the official use case, but I'd love
The
to hear it.
official use case of labels is saying, I do not believe that they're meant this way out of C. I didn't apply it.
Ah, got it. Thank you. Okay, that
That's
makes
the
sense.
official use case of labels.
I don't remember in what other context that has come up, but there is this really weird feature called labels. So this now looks like a label in JavaScript. The idea is supposed to be that you could actually break out of loops and tell, instead of telling the JavaScript interpreter to jump to the end of the for loop, you can say jump to some other arbitrary thing that is marked by this label, which is the weird feature that no one uses. But I think if you're a C developer, you're really comfortable with it.
You mentioned.
No? What other questions do you have? Yeah.
So I was wondering, how do you use the arrow function notation inside the parameter list of the function, and then apply the outer scope to the arrow function?
In the parameter list, you mean here?
Let's say I want double to be arguments to another function I'm calling. I'm defining it in the list.
Oh, you mean like set timeout?
Yeah, and then like, let's say, yeah, the second parameter, one of the parameters is double. I want to define it there. And then I also want to pass the outer scope. I want to find the outer scope.
I think that's where I lost you. So,
So you want to pass in the double function as a callback function, but then you want to bind as you're passing it.
Yes.
Oh, essentially you want to call X. Yeah.
No, but is there a way to just like do everything in one? Just scoping value.
So double is anonymous.
so if you want to do,
So you pass in, right, yeah.
so you could do this.
Right, but is there a way to do it with arrow functions?
No. So an arrow function's this, what is inside of here? So let's say that I alert. It's hard to tell from this. This value can never be changed from the time in which you define it. Find, call, apply, none of those things work for arrow functions.
Because I think you could have just done set timeout double how the timeout is. It would this.
Yeah, that would have worked because this
Yeah,
doesn't.
yeah.
There's no scope there.
So if you sign to double and then you bind to double, then it works.
You just have to assign the variable you want from this to the outer scope, and to another variable, so you can just pass it into that scope.
You mean like var self equals this?
Something like that, yeah.
So I think that it's, well, we'll talk about this after, because I don't think I understand what the goal is. But, so arrow functions are weird and different from functions created in almost all other ways, that maybe class, in that arrow functions, this context, is not overridable ever. You cannot use call, you cannot use apply, sorry, you can use call and apply, but it will not respect the first parameter. And you cannot use bind, or using bind would be is the same as passing your function.
But after you assign the variable double, it's treated as a regular function. Right?
This is, so let's say that I just,
Like after that first line, it's run double, it's just a regular function.
yeah, so alert type of double.
So if I want to pass the double to another function, I can do double define this.
No.
Okay.
You cannot bind, I mean, you can type that, it's not a syntax error.
Okay.
So trying to rebind, I can show you an example, and then so let's say that I hear,
Make a anonymous object, and then as an attribute, an error function. Is that the read for the first time I saw it? Yeah, make like an attribute called A. Yeah, just like that.
Does that work?
No.
Yeah, that would work. This.
Yeah.
It's binding to the error.
Yeah, that should not work. Yeah. It's essentially, this is window right there, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
cannot read property location of undefined.
Yeah.
So is
So the
this,
reason for this, sorry.
so once you're in an error function, this is down to nothing at all, it's about undefined.
This is because I'm in strict mode. So I'm using, how this is working is I'm running it through Babel.
Yeah.
It's auto-strictifying everything.
Of course.
Yeah.
But it's so within an arrow function, this is undefined. It's not the.
Well, so within an arrow function, this is not undefined. It is whatever it is in the scope that it is being defined in. So if I say here, alert type of this, undefined.
Yeah.
So that's the same undefined because that's where this is being defined. This function is defined inside of the window scope.
But if you wrap the bow object in a function, then this would be down to the function.
Yeah.
A non-arrow.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Makes sense. Fine.
I think when you show an example in a reactive mode of how big.
Yeah, I think so. Great. So right here. So React has a lot of really nice JS fiddle things. So here I have made a button component that extends from component, and a few of these things. I have set up a property called ABC here. And then in render, you'll see I write this the way that I would have written it before, like this is just how you normally write what goes inside render with JSX. I have a button, on click, I pass this alert, I just have some text and closes that out, and inside of that I have this alert. Now, a difference here, so when I click here, you'll see I now have an error. This is an error that is purely introduced by the fact that I am now using this class syntax to create React components. If I was using the non-class syntax, this thing in here would be something called auto-bound. It would be auto-bound to the current instance of the component. This is something that, when I first started using the class version, tripped me up a lot. The way that I fixed this, so one option is .bind this. Now if I run that, it'll work. Right. Similarly, and somewhat of a more common pattern for me has been this. So here, I introduce an arrow function that takes this .alert, and this value here is the same as this value that would be here. So now when I run this, it works. Yeah.
So this to me,
and I've never used ES5, ES6. Yeah. This looks like float. And I guess what I'm wondering is, why is it that when you have an arrow function, okay, I get why when you have an arrow function, this is down to this is the class. Why is it that when you have not the arrow function, this winds up being unbound? What is?
So that is actually, okay, that's a good point. So, okay, there's a few different options here. So someone mentioned earlier, var self equals this, and then we could just do self.alert, that's one option. There is the fat arrow, sorry, the arrow function option, and then there's this one. So this has now been officially, it was actually removed as a feature of PyReact. Why they did that? Partially because it is a performance hit to automatically do this to every function. They could, and they do currently. If you use React without classes, currently, they will automatically add a bind this. You see that? Yeah. They will automatically add a bind this to everything, so you never have to remember. The difficulty there from their perspective is that is a performance hit. One, because of increased memory of creating lots of functions whenever you re-render. Also because binding itself has some cost in order to like unwrap and get to the real this underneath. So they decided to, it's a performance benefit that they don't care to automatically provide for you. You can do it this way or whatever way you want to.
I suppose I'm wondering about this. Is the thing that is throwing the undefined, is the thing that is undefined in the context that all types of calculations, the thing that is undefined, is that the this or the parameter to a load? Is it the this in the render or the this in a load? What is the this in a load? Is being,
so if I do this, if I go
no bind. Nothing, no, the one that doesn't work.
So then message.
So in the alert method, then message is unbound. Oh, sorry, this is unbound in alert method.
Yeah, it's different context.
Different
This in alert is not the same as the this in the class.
Is that just due to like how the browser defines event handlers?
It is due to how, yes, I believe so. It's how it calls event handlers. It calls event handlers with a null context.
That seems like a very strange choice.
Wait, isn't the button in JSX like a class or a component, so it's now a different skill?
That's
Let's say
very
something about the disk scope that is in the disk scope. So that's so because it is this is already there. But in message, like in the alert, that this like that this message is actually in the right. It's referring to the constructor still, but this that it's still referring to is looking up to the button.
Okay.
Yeah, so React explicitly does it. React explicitly says if you have not passed one event, handlers are no. I do not know why. I presume it's to be able to see that error message instead of just thinking everything's okay.
It might be like the prevent default scheme, or it's like a clean sandbox sort of thing. Right?
I can see that. Yeah.
So the one React app I'm working on, like essentially my constructor had a ton of this dot, event handler dot bind. And it's like this dot event handler equals this dot event handler dot bind. This. Yeah, which is I guess what people used to do.
That's what people did before they added the auto bind.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I mean, is there like some new hotness in ES 2015 or future ES versions that
To do what?
to bind the function without creating a million functions every time the render is run to this, and without having to put a bunch of junk in the constructor. You know what I mean? Do you know? I feel like I saw like there's like a double colon.
So yes, the double colon operator is to bind, but that was, so you still need to set it. The double colon operator is, first of all, not in any standard super trail yet.
Oh, is that right?
I mean, sorry, it's like draft.
Okay.
So the way that the standard thing works are, everyone can put forward a straw man. Like, and a lot of people do. I mean, I can't. I mean, if you understand, like you could. If you understand enough about how to write a formal like parameter proposal, which I can kind of read them, but I do not know how, you can. So there are many proposals that are in straw man state, where people just say like, hey, wouldn't this be cool? And that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. There are many things that get from there into, there's like 5 different statuses, straw man, something, then draft, then ratify, whatever.
Okay.
So the bind operator does that, and I have seen that. And I think there's a Babel plugin to do that.
Yeah.
But all that does is remove the dot bind this with a colon in the beginning.
Okay.
It's just a syntactical way
Gotcha.
to do binding.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Clarify. So if you then like in the construction you say this dot message, and then you call this dot alert, that would work. That would display it correctly.
Here?
You did that. This dot alert there. Like that would
Yes.
work.
Yes. This would definitely work.
It's just the fact that.
So the reason that this works,
Render call or else work?
sorry?
Or
If this was here,
Outside of the JSX.
yes.
okay. So
Yep.
that works. It's just when you get to the conflict, then it's.
Yeah, and click is tied to the window.
Okay.
So the idea is that this.
So the actual JSX translation, that hasn't changed with, there's no difference between the translation between JSX and JavaScript that happens using classes.
No.
It's the exact same code.
Yeah, I'll show you.
Okay.
Yes, it is exactly the same code. That's how I concluded that it has to be.
Okay, that was a little faster in Github.
That was what?
It immediately templated this to be undefined in Github.
Yeah, but I think that might be just the REPL, because this would be a syntax error.
Yeah.
But yes, there's nothing special about the JSX translation for, so React, when you download React, it doesn't ask you, do you want the class version or the not class version?
Yeah.
It gives you both.
No, I know. I guess it makes a little bit more sense if you imagine translation. It's just unintuitive if you look at it.
Yes, I agree.
With the JSX syntax in there, that kind of hides the mistake, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I just like to follow up. If you are confused about this, and I always thought I understood what this meant, but I didn't. It turns out until I read this free book. It's called "You Don't Know JS."
Kyle Simpson.
Okay, yeah, very popular. But there's one section on this, and I thought I knew JS and what this meant. Turns out I didn't. I promise you, if you haven't read that, you'll learn something.
Yes, that is there are lots of very good blog posts. Kyle Simpson's whole book series. It's all available for free, and it is extremely thorough. And some of those things you might have to reread a couple times. It's very good. You don't know JS. It's great. So, yeah.
If you were to create a non-React object using the class syntax, would the methods be bound to the instances or not?
they are bound. If you don't use React, there's nothing special about binding at all. Like if you're just using like this kind of thing.
Right.
Then they are bound by this rules that currently apply in JavaScript, which is whatever is on the left-hand side of the dot becomes the context for whatever is on the right-hand side. So, for example, here I have reader.greet, and let's say that I do I need to think of a better example for this. So whatever is we'll talk about this after, but I'll explain it. The rules around what this is when you call a function are well defined. They're just not set up for an example in classes. Okay, so I will quickly jump ahead. So the next feature for React things is computed property names. This is where, so let's say you wanted to set up an object that had a key hello and a value world. The way to do that now in JavaScript is to create a variable, create an object literal, use the bracket syntax to stick the key in the right place, and assign that to something else. Now, this is nice, but not nearly as convenient as having an actual literal syntax for the same thing. So here you have to create an object and then use it. Whereas you could, now in ECMAScript 6, do the same thing with this square bracket syntax inside of the object. So what happens this is in ECMAScript 5 and below, this is the syntax thing. You cannot have square brackets inside of the object literal definition like this. But in ECMAScript 2015, whatever you put inside of here gets interpolated. So if I say, let's do here, same thing. So you can actually use template strings in there. You can use that to compute. You can use these things to compute things. And most saliently for React is you can use them to create state transitions that are very straightforward. So here, let's say I have multiple buttons, setting up those buttons such that when I click them, they change the message on them, and they are changed based on some value passed in as configuration, as part of state. So this, I don't know if I've necessarily found this annoying, but I have found that I no longer write code this way, where I need to create a new object just so that I need to set something inside of it, so that I then set that state back, so that it can do the whatever typical re-render thing would happen when I do this. But now, with this ECMAScript 6 feature, instead of having this empty object here, I can just move this whole thing into here. And now this is semantically equivalent to the previous example. So I click there, and the same thing works. So
Is that always going to be a string? So like if you go back to your previous example and you sign like hello, we want 2. Well, and you do like +1. Will that interpret as 3 or 31 or 21?
Sorry, can you say that question again?
Yeah, so in square brackets, it's always going to be a string, right?
If you set key to 1 as an int in it.
Oh,
So, so if you do that and then
no, so it would probably be 3 because in this.
yeah.
So the keys in objects, like JavaScript now has other data structures that I haven't talked about yet called maps that allow for non-objects, but all keys in objects are strings. And now symbols, I don't want to make that. So there are a few exceptions to this. So I expect that this would need me to do this.
We have that done.
Oh. Yeah.
Okay.
So what it would do is so what's in between the curly braces is first gets evaluated as an expression. That evaluated value would go there as if it were typed in, and just straight did this case. There's a huge rabbit hole around type coercion and implicit conversion between things, and that's actually now. Oh, I should talk about these things after. Like, you can actually now configure. You can write your own 2 primitive functions for objects in ECMAScript 2015. You can do lots of really crazy things with that. Yeah, it's weird, but it's crazy. So comparing and contrasting these two, this is in contrast to classes, which is now somewhat of a force required one. This is not as salient, but it is the new. I personally like this one a lot more. And you can do, since you can do whatever you want in here, you can do this by the way, and this are equivalent. Since you can do whatever you want in here, you can use template strings, you can take the IDs or classes of your inputs and interpolate them however you want. There, you can do a lot of very complicated things in here, such that this gets very useful. What questions do you have?
Could you comment on var const and let? I noticed you're using var, and that is throwing me off.
Oh, I mean that's.
It seems like a personal preference, but
It is completely a personal preference.
okay.
It is not actually a good one on my part.
I was wondering.
I have a linter.
Sure.
My muscle memory is still so far.
When I go to these meetups, half of this seems opinion and half of this seems fact, and I'm trying to figure out.
Completely
Okay.
muscle memory, not
Yeah.
opinion.
Okay.
My opinion would prefer that direction.
Okay.
Yeah, especially if I'm in
In a block.
yeah.
Okay.
So I'm the kind of person that types let in every language that knows this is what the actual keyword is. So what's the difference between the two?
Between let and var?
Yeah, that's what you do, isn't it?
Oh, yes. So ECMAScript 6 adds let and const. Let and const are the only 2 ways to create block-scoped variables in JavaScript. So if you want, to create,
basically never use var again. Use const as much as possible, or not possible, use let.
there you go.
That's my understanding.
I like that.
And the let is for hoisting,
Yeah,
more or less.
I agree. I think that honestly, my like linter is automated to let not const, but I agree. I think that's an opinion. So I feel the same way about like final and other languages. The bugs I have never had that bug around like accidentally overwriting the same variable name in a scope that should be small anyway. Like maybe if you have 100-line functions or something like that. But I agree with you in general. So if I put two curlies. So I'll get 1, and then I'll say this error is y is not defined. The reason for that is because let is this variable is not scoped for the whole file or the whole function, but rather only between those curly braces. Similarly, if this was const, same error would happen because y is only defined between this curly and that curly. So if and then the const change would be if I tried to write this, if I tried to reassign that, I would get an error saying y is read-only. Which is a very nice error to get if you are accidentally changing variables that you do not intend.
So if you use var for block, you would say y is undefined, which is confusingly different from not defined.
Yes, so if you just do like this,
Or if you did var z equals 10, and then var z down the bottom, you'd say it's undefined.
no, this would be 10. Hoist, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so if you would only be undefined if it was above. So let's say that I did this. So there's something called hoisting in JavaScript, which this is good. That's going to be
This version.
I figured it would var z equals undefined at the top.
So if I do it there, then it says undefined. So let and const, basically let and const work the way you think that variables should work ever, and hence use them alone. Var has some interesting and actually completely well-defined and well-behaved, but really weird cases called hoisting. Yeah?
Good question. Like, so I guess in vanilla JavaScript, essentially, you don't have much of block scoping. So then like if or else statement doesn't count as far as scope. That's the same behavior of let and const or not.
So let and const, so
if I define it, do they care about if they're inside of if or else statement at all?
if or else statement just creates separate blocks.
They what?
They are just separate blocks.
They still treat it as logical blocks.
Yes. Yes.
They are.
Yes.
They're treated as a logical scope for let only. Const and var are still hoisted.
Okay.
Functional scope.
Wait, const hosted? Is the definition not the declaration is hoisted too? Or is the function?
It's just the declaration, not the definition.
I don't know if that's true.
More intuitive than the var.
That's not gonna work.
Do lines.
Yeah, okay, so they're not actually hoisted. That's right. If you do a lot y, it might be the left.
Put the little y below the y.
If you move the left y between the left c, no, between the left c and the const y. Is it hoisted to the top of the y?
Let, okay.
Yeah, do alert inside the block at the very first line.
Between the two of them.
It is hoisted within
Wait,
the
no,
block.
there's a temporal dead zone thing. I think still applies.
It is, but it's undefined, not.
No. I think this is a bug. You know what? Let me check this. This is a great.
It's undefined.
This is like this
Fucking
should be a meetup
JavaScript.
by itself. Let's guess ES2015.
So outside the block, it's not defined, but inside the block, it's undefined.
I agree, but I think that might be a Babel thing.
No, I think that's the way it's supposed to be.
Put it in the common console.
What node version now? Damn it. That is not the right version. I'm on a machine I typically don't.
Yeah, you miss hide.
So I will look that up and we will talk about it. But I'm fairly sure that const is not hoisted. But I'll find that out. So some of these things, so Babel and all the transpilers, they make as close to spec possible outcomes, but some things they like cannot actually completely and utterly correctly do in every case. And my gut is that this is something that they were not able to do in every case. And because I'm forcing, even though Chrome, like V8 in Chrome does have a lot of the features, it doesn't have everything, so I'm forcing everything to use Babel. Ideally, you can, so when you're actually deploying this and developing this yourself, you can check to see what browsers you typically, what you're deploying to, and you can correctly set your presets to say, this, you don't need to compile let anymore. You don't need to compile const anymore. My systems will, the environments that I'm deploying to will handle that. I'm actually gonna skip ahead. So I have a lot of other examples here. I'll put these online, and then you can look at them afterward. Most salient, so destructuring, REST params, and these amazing ... things, which is now a pretty cool operator. Template strings. So what I have, so I've been talking for a little bit, an hour. I have just touched the complete tip of the iceberg with respect to ES2015 as a whole. The major one for React use is classes, because it is going to be required, and it's going to require changed code on your part. But there are dozens more. This is a list of so Kangax, developer, who maintains a compatibility table that has over like 140 or something ES2015 features, and lists of all the, not actually browsers, all the JavaScript engines and their versions to say that Node supports this, Node 6 supports this, not this. And you can actually go, if you can spend an hour clicking down the left side, sorry, that left side, just reading all the possible stuff. This is a link to that very fancy chart. You will spend hours in the Wikipedia or ES6 hole, like reading up about all of these.
Who's ever being like super non-compliant?
It's a good question. Closure.
I love it. You're doing the best.
Way to be consistent.
Well, Edge is pretty good. Edge is pretty good. Wait, Edge 14 is 90%. Edge 14 is Microsoft. Yo, Microsoft has really kicked it up a notch.
Yeah, they really stepped on, they realized they lost the browser wars, and now they actually have to put standards.
Sure.
Completely different.
How about that?
Edge is not like a shared code base. It's completely new.
Right.
They wrote it from scratch. Anyway, so this is a very you can click in here forever. You can set it by features to say this. So in terms of, one of the really nice features. So I met Douglas Crockford once. This is on video.
Do you want me to? I can just.
No, it's fine. So I met Douglas Crockford once, and I'll tell some of the stories later. But I'll tell one particular story.
I can literally just mute it. I'll mute it.
So I asked him what his favorite feature was in ES6, and he said tail call optimization. And it was kind of sad because it's the one that's like completely and utterly nuts. Like of everything, the one, because I was hoping that he would tell me something where I was like, yeah, no, I understand, that's great, that's so cool. But I didn't know because it's like not supported at all. Yeah.
Isn't so there's a proxy object. Isn't that something where Babel can't actually use it? So something I needed to use it.
So there's a few. There's actually a list of, and I have a different.
It's like ES20, like ES5 just can't handle.
So there is a group of intractable ES2015 features that a transpiler can. There's a spectrum of how you can adopt ES2015 outside of React. There's what you can get from a shim, which is actually a lot. You can just add a shim file, ES6 shim. You get spec compliant promises, spec compliant maps, spec compliant sets. Like almost all of the standard library you just drop in with one file, even if you're on Drupal 5 and whatever. I mean, people are still working with these things. I myself have done a lot of it. So like, you can still get a lot of new features by just doing that. Then the second sort of tier here is transpilable features. Some things are extremely easily transpilable, like destructuring or computed property, the thing I just showed, computed properties, property names. You can do that in your head, like it's just one moving the lines. Then there are some really complicated ones, like let can get very complicated. For a while, I don't think they still use that. In ES5, without complicated function moving magic, the only way, or rewriting magic, the only thing in ES5 that exhibits the same behavior as a let scoped variable is an exception that is thrown in cart. I'm not kidding. So if you go to Treasure, which is a precursor to Babel, made by Google, and you go back to like the version from 2012 or something, and you type let x equals 1, it'll turn that into try, block, throw 1, catch, x. And you're like, first of all, it's the coolest thing in the world. It's the biggest hack on earth. But it's also completely semantically correct, which is great, because it is the variable x in that case is not seen in the entirety of the try block. But the problem is that is the slowest thing any JavaScript engine can do, because once you're in exceptional condition, like all optimizations are thrown out the window. So when you use that, your code slows down by orders of magnitude. Gratefully, like Babel people and I'm sure Google people as well, there are now better ways to approximate let in most cases. So then there's the transpilable category, and then there are the completely intractable category. Things where you cannot, even if you were willing to bend on spec compliance, you can't even come close for some features. So that includes things like, yes, proxies. So proxies are a meta programming feature. But then I can't make one of these for that because it doesn't even work in Babel, and it's great. It is now in V8, but it's like not turned on anywhere. Node doesn't have it yet. They'll be there eventually. Proxies are a way to have objects that any of you use Ruby? Okay, so it's like something like a super method missing. So it's something that no matter what property you try to access on an object, you can run a function. Right now in ES5, we have getters and setters, which is somewhat like this as a meta programming feature. But ES2015 has something called proxies, where you can, regardless of the name of the property you're trying to access, you can write imperative code to look that up. So you can have an object that officially has no properties, but whenever you write something to it, it can correctly find what you need to. That's one use case. There are many, there are like different use cases for it. There's the weak maps. So weak map is something where it's a really popular one, but it's somewhat hard to explain because it's really only useful for library authors. Or I guess if you're doing some very complicated memory management. Maybe even not complicated. I can think of use cases, but they're really weird. But the idea around weak maps are like objects. You can put in a key and you can put in a value. Weak maps allow you to put in a key and a value where the act of putting the key in does not keep that thing in memory. So if that key and value are the only things referencing it in the JavaScript runtime, the JavaScript runtime is allowed to garbage collect it. That's not something we can do because programmers have no access to like memory management in JavaScript. You can't say how many references to this variable are there in the environment right now. So that's not something you can even come close to. You have to wait for it. Tail call optimization is one where you can get there are some tail calls that are like Babelable. I don't know what the right word is.
I'm tweeting it. It doesn't matter. I'm tweeting it.
Yeah, so there are some tail, like if it's really obvious. I don't know the word. The tail call optimization is this thing where if you are using recursion. If you're using recursion and it ends up recursing way too many levels, you can get like a stack error. I forget the name of this actual error, because the function has called itself too many times. What many fancy programming languages do, most very functional ones, Clojure, I think someone was a fan earlier, it says, whenever you're calling yourself many, many times, programming language be a little bit smarter about this. They're gonna, all you're gonna do, instead of calling yourself many, many times, just change the input values and use the same space in memory. So change the input values, do the function, take that result, put it back and do it again, and put it back and do it again. So you can use only one slot in the stack to do it over and over again. This is something where, as a human being, I can read code and tell you, like, this is obviously a tail call optimizable thing, but the engines itself can only tell in certain cases. So some of them, if it's really obvious and it's like the last line, it can figure it out. The Babel can figure it out, but you can make some really complicated tail call optimizable things that you have to have the engine for to do it. That is not just the last line. I think there are more, but I don't really remember them. Weak maps, proxies, and tail call optimizations are the big ones that cannot be. Yeah.
What is your favorite? Yes.
Okay, so there's this thing. Okay, this is kind of really complicated because I have so many. But there's the symbol is probably my. If I was to categorize everything I find exceptionally cool, it's under symbol. So symbols in JavaScript are the first time a new type has been added in like a decade or more. Symbols are a new type that are similar to strings, kind of sort of. I don't know, I already feel like I'm so over. So symbols are, you can think of them as basically fancy strings. But what I find most fun about them has nothing to do with the fact that they're new and they exist, but the language has made certain changes such that symbols can do some really magical things. Like other programming languages have some. So there is something called scope.iterator. So when you write functions, when you write objects, you can't assume that those objects are able to be passed to for of loops or for in loops. If you just write your own object, you make your own linked list. Let's say you're like trying to do the Google interview or something, and you're building your own linked list. In ES5, there's no way to use the for in loop on top of that, or the for of loop on top of that. Using symbol.iterator, the ES2015 gives you a way to like hook into the language's current existing syntactical features to add your own way of looping in your own data structures, which I find to be extremely geeky cool. And so there's other ones. This symbol.unscopables, like they're symbol.blank. There are 4 or 5 different things that allow you to fundamentally change how programming languages work for your own data structures, which I find very cool.
These are kind of Ruby-ish, I think, or.
Yeah, I mean, in my head it's Pythonistic.
Right.
But yes,
it's something.
I think other programming languages, so programming languages with operator overloading, yes, definitely. Mm-hmm. But there are also, like Java gives you the iterable interface to say, I don't care how you iterate, just give me a new one. Ruby is the same thing, right? Like .each, you mix in an enumerable. So like all languages, many languages give you this, hey, tell me how you want to do things, and we'll let you use our syntax. JavaScript now has that, and I think that's pretty cool. So what I think you should do in wrapping up, switch to ES2015 class-based components. This is something that is coming. This is something that will definitely, it's already deprecated, the old one, and it is a little bit of a pain. So you should, so I've given a few different people to read here. I'm sure you've heard of all of them. Axel Ruschmeyer, he has the Tuality blog. This man is prolific as hell. He has written so much about this. He's actually on TC39, the group that standardizes JavaScript within ECMA. Arya Hidayat and Adi Osmani, also amazing authors, prolific as hell, and very, very good at explaining complicated JavaScript concepts. Transpile and ship everything if you have the opportunity. I had to use one meme, it's like one of those things you just have to do. Cool, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So I have 17 questions I will take over now right now.
Okay, that's fine. I'll just say we're gonna shut this down and get the slice of pizza. But yeah, so
Well, I do have one